Awesome. Welcome everybody to our June webinar series. We are thrilled to be diving into another exciting lean topic with guest speaker Felipe Engineer-Manriquez. We just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping notes as we wait for everybody to get on to the webinar. First off, if you're looking to access any of our past webinars on demand, these are available at nialli.com/events. You can go back and see all of our past webinar series. We've also got these webinars listed on our YouTube channel for reference. And I did want to let you know that we have the next webinar in our series up for registration. I'll post a link into the chat afterwards. And this is all about Lean Made Simple for small contractors, specialty trades. We're going to be diving into this with Lean expert Lenny Howling. He's a consultant here in the Alberta region, and he has a lot of expertise in companies that are sub 100. So if you're a smaller organization and you're not sure if going on this lean construction journey is right for you, Lenny's got some great insights and things you can do to get started that are not as complicated as you may think they are. In addition to that, we've got a lot of exciting upcoming events on the calendar. We hope you can join us July 16th for an exciting webinar with the Lean Construction blog. We're going to be having Simon Carter, who is the head of business improvement at Wilmot Dixon, joining us for a session and talking about his lean transformation journey. And there's several other conferences coming up. I would be remiss to mention LCI Congress. I know Felipe is going to be, our guest speaker for today is going to be playing a pretty active role in this year's LCI Congress. That's going to be down in Arlington, Texas area in October. So if you are interested in learning more about lean construction, we highly encourage you to make sure to attend that event this year. And finally, I'd like to welcome Felipe Engineer-Manriquez, our guest speaker for this webinar. So Felipe, thank you so much for joining us. And I'll pass the discussion over to you and Alan to get into the meat of our presentation today on, why isn't there better awareness around lean methods out there in the field?
Thank you so much, Laura.
All right. Thank you, Laura. I think what we should do is, first of all, I think introduce ourselves, Felipe. So Alan Boycu, as mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Nialli, and I just love hosting these webinars, and I learned so much from thought leaders in the industry. So Felipe, why don't you start by giving us a little idea of how you made it to where you're sitting today, your journey into construction and then into being more involved in lean practice and what you're doing now, just to give people an idea, if they don't already know you, of course.
Yeah, for those of you that haven't gotten to see my content on LinkedIn or YouTube or my podcast, here we go. I started off in construction almost by accident. My degree is in electrical engineering, and a buddy of mine was working on a construction project, another fellow electrical engineer, and he said, "Hey, you should come tour this project." And I said, I trusted him. So we went and we toured, and I thought it was like incredible. It was a research building on our campus, University of Illinois at Chicago. And I just fell in love with the idea of thinking that we could make something that would be very hard to throw away. Because a lot of the stuff that my peers were making, where we were seeing, products being made and then being replaced within 6 months to 2 years at best. And here we had the chance to build a building that would be very difficult to throw away, not impossible. But at that time, over about 30 years ago, we were building projects to last 50 to 100 years. And today, I was talking to my design friends recently, and they're telling me now owners are thinking, we're somewhere between the 25 to 30-year range, or sometimes rarely do we do the 50-year. So I think that was really cool to get started like that. And then from there, Alan, and again, thank you for having me on the webinar. Super appreciate being here. And after getting that degree and that taste of construction, I went to work on construction projects, and that's all I've done my entire rest of my career. I worked for 3 bigger general contractors, and now I'm working at the Boldt Company for the last 3 years. And I got, at some point in my career, I realized, Alan, like I think a lot of your listeners, you might realize that you still have more stuff to learn. And I was like about 10 years in, as still a young assistant manager. And I became aware that I had stopped reading since I graduated from school, and I had stopped learning. I got so consumed with just working and then balancing with the needs of home life and family, that I totally forgot that got to keep learning. So luckily, I bumped into a director that had some lean construction experience. His name was Michael, and Michael turned me on to reading a book called Lean Thinking: How to Banish Waste in Your Organization by Womack and Jones. And that book had some ideas in it that were transformative, where I was able to apply lessons from like the first or second chapter and dramatically reduce my work. So then that put me on a new path of starting to learn, starting to read, and eventually I got to becoming a lean construction director for McCarthy Building Companies. And then that led me to going much, much deeper into all the different lean tools and practices before I could do it full time at the Boldt Company as a project delivery services director, where in the beginning I was traveling across the country. So I got to see lean from coast to coast with a very lean company, the Boldt Company. And now these days, Alan, I'm focused primarily in sunny and beautiful California. That's why I think even there's a little tint in my glasses, because the sunlight coming through the windows is so bright. It's activating the UV. The future's so bright, Alan.
You're making people jealous, and well, clearly the reading paid off. I mean, you've been actually given accolades and awarded awards for your contribution to helping the construction industry. So obviously paid off. So why don't we do some level setting? Because there's some weird words we use, like even lean,
Absolutely.
means something different. So why don't we talk about LPS, the Last Planner System, Takt Planning, and Scrum are sort of the three process that you've sort of identified as the most prevalent. Can we just do a layman's definition of those terms? Because they're a little strange.
Yeah, so I will start with lean.
Okay.
Lean, Lean, not capitalized. It means to lean over, or in common English, it's like to have less, to have no fat, to be fat free almost,
True.
as in terms of like food. But what it means in the context of industry is it means to have just the right amount without anything extra. And when there were some researchers studying Japanese companies, and they're actually looking at manufacturing around the world. This was a group from MIT, coincidentally led by Womack and a few others. They kept fighting with each other about, we can't call this thing that we're observing Toyota, because it'll just turn people off. Like if we go to Chrysler and say, you got to do this Toyota thing, Chrysler's going to be like,
the Toyota way. Yes.
Get out of our office, right?
Yeah.
And if you go to a construction company and say, we got to do this Toyota thing, they say, we're not a car company. So they fought for a long time. And finally, one of the researchers, who was still a grad student at the time, John said, well, I think the best thing we could call it is lean, because they have just the right amount of stuff that they need. They don't have anything extra, and it's powerfully effective. And so they were like, we hate that word. Like they went back and forth, but finally they were like, we can't think of anything better. And so lean became a word. And even if you go to Japan now and you ask companies where you observe lean things happening, like a focus on people, and like you see on my shirt, I've got respect for people, continuous improvement, values like this, and then actions and processes. Most people would not recognize lean until now. So that came out like in the, I'd say it's like 80s, I believe it was like around the 80s. And then so for almost 30 years now, we've had this word, and people have hated it since day one, Alan. They still don't like it. And a lot of companies in the media, anytime you see a company doing job layoffs or consolidating or doing a merger and acquisition and then terminating a lot of people, the media will always incorrectly say, in an effort to be more lean, we're reducing jobs, or in an effort to be more lean, we're shedding resources, like we're closing down offices, we're reducing redundancies. And those things are not in the spirit of what lean means, and definitely not in the spirit of lean construction. And so if you're going to respect people, you don't terminate someone's job. And just to give contrast, like in the companies that do lean very well, companies like Toyota, which are amazing examples, and there are others, but this is one of my favorite. I just happen to drive a Toyota and I get paid nothing. Toyota pays me nothing to say good things about them. But I will say that their attrition rate, their turnover rate globally is less than 1%, and it's somewhere closer to 0.5%.
Hmm.
And when people do retire, because very few people ever get terminated, they keep doing lean things even in retirement. There's a lot of ex-Toyota employees that they decide to retire, and they're still acting as consultants and helping companies and organizations do this because it becomes like very habitual, this continuous improvement thing. And I could definitely tell you, Alan, I got bit by the lean bug, and I can't stop making things better, improving, and working with amazing people. So that's lean does not stand for less employees are needed. Let's just get that out there. It's not an acronym. It's a word that describes a series of principles and practices, and the practices vary from company to company and even within companies. And so
Yeah,
that's
so
lean.
yeah, let's talk a little bit about those practices like LPS and Takt and Scrum. You're one of the few. We were engaged with Jeff Sutherland at some point when we were looking at our collaborative software and how we might apply it to the agile world. So we're quite familiar with Scrum. But why don't you talk about those three processes and take it apart like the way you took Lean apart?
Yeah, I'll start with all three of them share one fundamental core thing below the surface that a lot of people don't see. And this is why I love the title. Oh, this is like lean but not seen, because most of the stuff's invisible, and very
Mm,
few people have the time to do a deep dive and get really nerdy and research where these things came from. But when you look under the surface, if I open up the hood of Last Planner System of Production Controls, or we lovingly call LPS or Last Planner, and I open up the hood and look under what's the engine of Scrum, and I open up the hood and let's see what's the engine of Takt, TAKT. All three of those have the same engine inside, and that engine is called PDCA or PDSA: Plan, Do, Check, Study, Adjust. Plan, Do,
mm,
Check, Adjust. And that method, those four action words: plan, do, check, act. I'm going to go with those because they're easy to say. Those
mhm,
four things are an adaptation from the scientific method. And the scientific method in layman's terms is I have an idea that I think I can solve a problem. I'm going to conduct some experiments. I'll design at least one experiment. I'll try it out. I'll observe with all of my senses what happens. And then I decide, do I continue doing this? Do I change? Do I adopt something new? Do I experiment again? Do I abandon what I thought? Was I end up really solving the wrong problem? And I go into this like thinking and doing cycle. And that experimentation cycle is what makes LPS, Scrum, and Takt work so magically. Now, in order to close the loop on the engine, I've got to have some feedback mechanism. And that's where I'll start with Last Planner System first. In Last Planner System, you're literally just answering 5 questions: should, can, will, did, learn. And the learning is not so much as a question, as more of a continuous process. I was actually having a debate with a master's degree student recently, Alan, about the learning part. And a lot of researchers, when they look at the graphics on Last Planner System or the things that are published for it, they misunderstand the learning is happening as a last step. And it
mhm.
was never meant to be like you do all these things and then at the end you do like a post-mortem and you see like, what did we learn? No, you're continuously learning. Every time you take an action, you're learning something, whether you pause and stop or not. And so Last Planner System is this a system used in Lean that kind of codifies and systematizes what we call pool planning, PULL planning. And pool planning is where we have an idea of some target state we want to be at with our team, and we plan ourselves backwards to today or when we say we're going to start. Like, for example, there's a nice painted wall behind me that's got some lines. We might say that in our pool plan, finished is when the wall's painted with the lines on. And we might say, starting right now, we don't even have the wall built. So we would develop collaboratively with some people a sequence of tasks that get us to a wall laid out, framed, mechanical, electrical, plumbing stuff in the wall, drywall, and then finally painting, with ultimately ending with these darker black stripes. And that's when we can look at that and say, okay, we're done. We've got that. And making that plan together with the team allows the teams to do lots of things on focusing on flow, stable production, and just getting planning and scheduling back to the you and me making a promise to each other level. Instead of it being a 95-page Gantt chart, critical path method schedule that coincidentally fails every time, if that's the only thing you're using to run your project. And
Yeah,
then
it's interesting.
yeah, that's the last planner part. And I could unpack it more if you've got some questions or something popped up.
No, I think it's interesting though that you talk about the flow and the conversation. I mean, you're talking about agreements between people and then, oh, something went wrong. Oh, let's learn because we need to still hit that milestone or end in mind. How do we do that? We've planned really well to get there on that day. So let's maintain it. You actually have a mutual goal. And I think that's another one of
Yeah.
the elements of these systems is you actually build consensus with a focus on this culture of planning or production control. So
Yeah.
how is Takt different? I
Yeah.
want to hear your take on Takt and Scrum that's different than LPS.
Yeah. And as I transition to Takt down, I'll tell you that I even, it's well known that I
Mhm.
talk to artificial intelligence daily. And my record in one day, like at one straight swoop, was like almost 4 hours, which is troublesome for some people. Imagine me talking to a machine for 4 hours straight, but I've done it. In one of these conversations, I was asking ChatGPT what, knowing what you know about Last Planner System, the chat knows a lot about LPS. It knows quite a bit. I said, what are some assumptions that people have that in order to have a successful LPS, they might not necessarily know? And the interesting thing, I'm going to transition to Takt with this one, is it said that most people in construction, based on its training, do not prioritize flow of the work. And so
Mm.
the people that know how to do Last Planner System intentionally put the workflow first and resource utilization second. And I thought that
Mm.
was fascinating that the robot overlords already know one of our blind spots in planning and scheduling. So
Mm.
now Takt, Takt, is a German word that means rhythm or beat. And in that phrase, when we look at the history of these things, Alan, and you're not wrong. Like I've nerded down and done a lot of reading on these things and gone really deep. I've been practicing Last Planner System now for about 20 years. Takt for really intensely the last four years, and Scrum for about nearly 15 plus years. So when I'm talking about these concepts with you, I've got firsthand deep experience with teams both in the United States and overseas. And so in Last Planner System, we make this collaborative plan together. In order to go to Takt, I go one more level deeper. And in Takt, I'm going to get the team to agree on what rhythm of planning are we going to get on. And the most
Mm.
common rhythm of planning is a 5-day work week. And so if I get a team on a 5-day work week rhythm of planning, something starts to have to happen. We start to realize that some trades or designers, because this works in design as well, so I'll just say crews for design crew or trade crew from this point forward. Some crews are really productive and they can do a lot of things in 5 days. And some have more tedious work and they can do much less in 5 days. So when I Takt and I get people to agree on a 5-day cycle, as an example, we call that a Takt macro. If we're going to work on a 5-day cycle, some people have to slow down and some people might have to speed up. And I'll tell you that contractually, dollars wise, it's almost always free to slow people down. It almost always costs you something to speed people up. So if I have a
Mm.
tedious process of like a 5-step thing and includes like maybe curing time for concrete, there's only so many things I can do to speed that up when I get to the point where the concrete has to cure. And that's just a natural process that takes hours and days sometimes. And so I might have to change and do like smaller pours of concrete placement so that I can get more concrete placed while other concrete's curing. Or I might increase my concrete crews or my finishing crew, or I might slow everybody else down and go to the speed of the slowest part of my system. So in Takt, I'm going to slow down, some speed up, or just some slow down to match the slowest. Stay on the 5-day. You could be on a 2-week Takt as well. There's no reason why you couldn't be on a 2-week Takt. but I won't recommend it. I would recommend 5 days or less. Now, the smaller your takt time, the more cognizant you have to be about the speed of the people and the crews, as well as the conditions on the site. And you've got to do more pre-work. You have to get more tight on your logistics if you're going to go to less than 5 days, and you've got to get tighter on how things are coming in and out of the spaces where people are actually going to do the work. So this is like something that a lot of people miss when they look at a takt time example or they watch a YouTube video. We have Alan, we have a lot of YouTube heroes, people that watch a YouTube video one time and they think they understand something because they heard some buzzwords or saw a process. And I'll tell you, until you do it yourself, it's not the same as watching it.
Yeah.
It's like you and I could watch rugby, but that doesn't mean we know how to get into a proper scrum formation.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to shift gears because you've been in this long enough and you've seen the challenges of adoption, and we talked a little bit about that. And you said adoption remains surprisingly low, even that there's like proven value. I mean, we could talk all day that, you should do this, should do, but what is the adoption? Are we at like what percentage? And is it large projects or small projects? Like, where's the adoption low, and are there numbers?
Yeah, there are numbers. And so that's one of the benefits of getting hands-on. So I was talking to one of my electrical engineer friends, and he used to work in the nuclear industry.
Hmm.
And he said in the nuclear industry, because of regulation, they actually have a repository that all nuclear sites have a place where they can all communicate together, all of
Hmm.
them. So if they have a lesson learned or a process or an interpretation of something, they can all go to one spot and have like a master set of this is what the variation is, or this is the deal. These are the specifics. In construction, we're a completely siloed and segregated industry. Even across our supply chains for any given project, we don't have visibility into what's going on. I'll take a company, for example. Think of any big GC, general contractor company you can think of. That company, if you ask a project team and working in the city, we'll take a city that we're not working in. I'll take Buffalo. Let's say we're working in Buffalo, New York, and I've got this East Coast based GC, and we have 5 projects in Buffalo. The chances that the project teams of the 5 projects in the same city know what the others are doing is about 0%
Hmm.
at any given time, because they're so focused on what they're doing. They don't have time where they actually come together. This is one of the things that Michael, who taught me about lean early on, he said that information flow is like, it's so transparent. It's so not transparent. It's opaque, that we started having these quarterly meetings where people from different projects could come together and just talk through things, challenges, and what we're experimenting with. And everyone had said, like, 100%, we've never had this ever. And we had people on those participating that had 20 years of experience. It was their first year. So if you added up all the experience, I think one time at one meeting, we had so many people that the combined construction experience was something like 500 years when you added up all the people's experience. And everybody said, in the 500 years of our collective experience, we've never come together and had this. So it wasn't until I started participating in the Lean Construction Institute that we started getting some data about, what's the saturation of some of these things. And there was even a paper published this year in 2025 at the International Group for Lean Construction, and a group of researchers from Cambridge said, if lean's been around since the 1980s, and lean construction specifically since the 90s when last planner system was published, where's the evidence that it's actually saturating the market? Where's the proof?
Hmm.
And so, like, I look at you have all these different projects and you have variation in how people implement it. The vast majority of people in construction, Alan, don't even know what last planner system is. They couldn't even tell you what it is. And it does show up in some contracts. There are some owners, like some very large healthcare owners. We're seeing it more in data centers now. We're seeing it in industrial construction now, where they're asking teams, yes, you're going to give me a critical path method schedule, but tell me how you're going to use Last Planner system in this project, because we know that Last Planner system run projects have more reliability and are more likely to finish on time or earlier. So we're starting to see some metrics. But if I look at just LCI's group of companies, and one of the consultants did a deep dive and looked at the percentage of companies in the portfolios. This was self-reported across more than 24 different organizations. And we found that in the United States alone, Alan, where we have a $3 trillion construction industry, all for all areas of construction, the people practicing lean was still in the sub $100 billion range. So if you do the math, like, and I do the math on smaller scale, I don't want to name any company because everyone has different ideas of what lean is. But if we just look at, can I see principles in action? Do people know what principles and processes they're using? Like, let's just say Last Planner system. If I had to put a percentage on it to answer your question, super long answer, right? If I had to answer the question, I would say across the industry, at least in the United States, we're less than a 5% Last Planner system adoption, which means we have a 95% opportunity. And
Yeah,
even you, right?
it
Even
feels greenfield.
it's a green field. And like you have a platform that allows for people to collaborate, and you have a portfolio with companies in, and you can tell, and don't say anything. Don't you got to plead the fifth. Don't
Yeah, that's right.
implicate yourself. But you've got companies where if you've got a larger, even a medium-sized general contractor, medium size, this is like around $1 billion contractor, will have at any given year 5,000 projects. So if you look at the logos on your website of companies using your software, if you can find $1 billion year company that's doing revenue at the $1 billion level, they're going to have around 5,000 projects roughly, and it could be small to large. How far away is their usage of Last Planner system across 5,000 projects? You're going to find a number that's less than 5%.
Mm.
And when I say Last Planner system, people mess this up, Alan, all the time. And the same is true for Takt, and the same is true for Scrum. These three things are systems, which means you cannot a la carte use them. You cannot just go and say, oh, I'm only going to do this part. I'm only going to do daily planning and say that I'm doing Last Planner system. No. If you're doing just daily planning or daily huddles, then you're just doing daily huddles. You're not doing Last Planner system. It's a system. If you say, like, I'm going to create a Scrum board and have some sticky notes, you're not doing Scrum. You need to have somebody in each of the roles, and it can be the same person. That's okay, but somebody has to be operating in those functions. I have to be able to see the functions and the minimum meetings to say that, yes, this team is doing Scrum. And for Takt, if I don't see trade leveling, if I don't see coming down, pulling to create a sequence, and then working towards a Takt, and then I can't observe Takt control, then I don't have a project actually using Takt. I have a project that's doing some lightweight pull planning and then pushing durations on people, which just called CPM.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, you made an interesting reference that a Toyota employee, when they eventually, retire or leave the company, they go away with a lean attitude, which makes me think, well, that's cultural, right?
Yeah.
And so there's structural culture. Getting to that point, we've had a speaker that actually talked about how hard it is to build that structure, like, or build that culture on a team or in an organization. Um, like, why is that? What are the things that are keeping things at 5%? Or is there anything? Or is it just the nature of construction and the people that are in it? Like, talk a little bit about how, as an industry, I mean, you're dedicated to making things easier, better, faster, more safe, more enjoyable. It's kind of your mantra a little bit that I've seen
Yeah.
in your writings and podcasts. So let's talk about a solution or things you've seen work or things that you've done or things that have other people done that people went, aha,
Yeah.
and started to move forward, and everybody gets involved and gets on, rowing the same direction. Like, do you have some concrete examples of how people
Oh, yeah,
get over that?
I do. And I have one actually that involves a concrete sidewalk.
Okay.
So let me tell a
Perfect.
story. So
Sure.
I'll tell a story. This is a project that when I got involved, everything according to their dashboards was green. Everything was good. I'm not going to name the project to protect the guilty and the innocent, but I'll anonymize it. But this is from my relative past. This team was reporting all their metrics looked good. They had one metric showing that they could be having some challenges with schedule due to weather. And I looked at the photos. This project was not in my backyard. This was far away. I looked at one of the pictures, and I saw in the picture that they had the roof wasn't done, and they were at the time about 4 months until they were going to turn over the project to the owner. And I thought, in a commercial building, or a building where you don't want the weather coming in an area that does actually rain, it's not like they were building a courtyard with an open ceiling. This is a building where we have things inside, and we got to protect the things inside. I was like, there's no way in any schedule that not having the roof done 4 months to the end means that the schedule's okay. It's impossible.
That's
But
right.
everybody on the looking at this data was like, they just saw everything's green. Okay, there's a small schedule challenge, but they talked about working overtime, and people just did this. They nodded their head and they moved on. And I was like, hell no. I was like, I went to the internet because this was a higher profile project. And online, I found pictures from news. The news was recently there doing some stories, and I could see like the site bigger than what the team had shared in this dashboard. And I was like, whoa, there's like the landscaping's missing. There's no sidewalks into the actual building itself. I'm like, there's a lot of work that has to happen. It's like, I don't see that work happening in 4 months based on what I'm hearing. So I made a phone call and I tricked myself onto the site, Alan. Tricked myself with respect. Respectfully, I wanted to just tour it because it just looks so beautiful. And the team let me tour it. And people know that when I'm on a project, typically something could be amiss because I just don't show up to have fun and drink their coffee. And we saw that there were a lot of challenges. The team did not have the psychological safety to talk about, but
Mm.
one-on-one, they could say things one-on-one in person or your boots on the ground there. And one of the things that I noticed was that it was very hard for the workers to get in the building. And so the teams, they know like my background. They're like, what can we do? And I said, I don't want to suggest a bunch of things. There's a lot of things you could do, but let's just do something super easy. Let's do something for the workers first.
Mm.
I said, let's build a temporary sidewalk into the building so that when they bring their equipment, stuff on carts, or just walking in, they don't step into this 16 inches of mud
Mm.
and lose a boot trying to get in the building, which almost happened to me. That's why I was very sensitive about it. And the superintendent he had said, I'm not doing this for these workers. He's like, they don't deserve it. And I
Hmm.
told him, I was like, everything that you get is because of what you've done or not done.
Mm.
And I said, either you do it or I'll make a phone call and I'll get somebody else to operate the equipment and do it. But it needs to be done before we do anything else. And we were at that point admitting that they're not going to make it. They were finally admitting they weren't going to make it in 90 days. And so reluctantly, they made the call. The next day, we had the sidewalk. And then the workers were like, wow, this contractor actually does care about us. And that created an easy win that allowed us a week later to bring in some of the select trades and ask, what can we do to make things better? And that's where we started. We started first by recognizing a problem and then giving the workers something to make their life easier. And only when we did that and they recognized it, then we worked to make things better. And then making things better was like we said, you're doing some fake things that nobody cares about. If you study the 8 wastes of lean construction, I like to use the acronym downtime. I won't say what they are now, but people should look this up. There's a lot of
Mm.
things. There's at least 8 major categories of things that you do that waste your time, waste your resources, don't add any value, and help burn people out. So in that project, we stopped doing some of those and we used the save time to start planning in a different way. And we ended up putting that team on a Takt, and they ended up finishing ahead of schedule. And the owner realized that they weren't going to be ready because they were banking on us to be late. So the owner gave us a 2-month time extension because they weren't going to have their
Wow,
owner furnished
interesting.
equipment in the building on time. So that it
So,
ended up finishing perfectly.
so that's an interesting approach, and it just seems like you almost, I mean, you talked about things being contractual, that people are saying you need to practice last planner or something. And the owners, like, is that the key, that owners need to sort of advocate for a people-centered, I'll call it respect for people-centered
Yeah.
approach, waste walks, betterment walks, Gemba, however you want to describe it. Like, does it need to come from the top, or is it like, how do you get past 5%? I mean, there's people
Yeah.
like yourselves and ourselves. We talk a lot about conversations and last planner and, whatever it is. But how do you get to the people that it's easy to preach to the converted, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Oh, for sure. I think
So,
that owners don't recognize the problem.
mm,
So most of what we have in our current contracting paradigm, which is still predominantly design, then bid, then build,
hmm,
comes from the government. The
right,
government's one of the largest motivators of the the
mm,
industry, and a lot of contracts and laws and regulations all come through the government. And
right,
there was a lot of the stuff goes back to the turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s. These different types of contracting, and what has happened is that there is a paradigm, there is a culture, especially in the States. And the United States has exported this crazy method of construction across the world. I've seen this in every country I've touched. Are exported ways of building, which are not the best ways for people. And what we found is that it's coming from a lot of regulation. I don't want to just throw my hands up and just point the finger at one place. The government, typically at a high level, is all laws that we have, Alan, doesn't matter what country you're in, are typically just the consensual agreement of the people. So there is in order to get the movement to happen, to get it past this 5%, I would say that people need to recognize two things. Number one, Superman isn't coming. Superman's not going to land on your project and make it better, but you have the ability to create some bandwidth of your own and do some experiments on your own and try things on your own. That's why if you go to the EBFC Show website, I have tons of blog posts published for free with step-by-step how-to. I have a free construction Scrum course to get you started making your own Scrum board in less than 30 minutes. And then I talk to my guests about these different lean tools and practices so that we can create a hub with my partners at the Lean Construction Institute that also creates a community of people sharing these things like what you're talking about on your webinars as well, because there's no place to go. Like when I started this 20 years ago, there were only white papers to read, just white papers.
yeah,
And
I read IGLC, like there's a whole
yeah,
sea of them.
yeah,
Exactly,
and the white papers are not at reach for most people on projects.
true.
If we start asking people on projects, did you even know that there are construction research papers published? 99 out of 100 people tell you they don't know that.
Mm,
So we have to do better at advocating what these things are and these methods are, and continuing this type of work, like these
yeah,
conversations, to
right.
increase awareness, because it's nearly invisible.
So it's an awareness journey. I just want to open up to the audience. If you have questions, there is a Q&A section, and we'll be happy to entertain any questions. And again, Felipe is referencing EBFC, and that's his podcast. I think if you just do a search on that term, you'll get to there, and you're very generous in offering, those resources. I think the other thing is, we met up at the Lean Construction Blog Conference, and so that's another organization. And then there's lots of COPs in different communities of practice in different areas that are trying to advocate, um, you know, awareness, and they have speakers in. So spending an hour every month is a pretty small investment to get easier, better, faster, safer. And we won't get into that topic. But Laura, I don't know if there's any questions or queries that you've picked up.
Yeah, I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but please, folks on the call, definitely put those questions in. Felipe, I actually have a question for you, and that's really around getting started. I think, there a lot of people see lean as this, this big mountain that they have to climb, and they have to be an expert, and they have to get super deep on it. Do you have any recommendations of sort of like some easy first steps, or I know we've talked about joining communities to practice, but like, what are some of those things that teams can do to just start getting into that mindset and starting to shift some of their behaviors and patterns?
Yeah, I think I'll go team and individual. So for a team, the best thing to do is to learn together, make it social. And a lot of the best high performing teams that I have the pleasure of working with will do what they call a lunch and learn. So they'll do on a Friday, typically a Friday, they'll just eat lunch together and they'll talk about a lean topic. And somebody will do like sometimes a 3-minute presentation on here's something that I looked at this week. I did a deep dive. Here are the things to learn. And you could always start with the free content at the Lean Construction blog, which Alan mentioned. I've published papers there as well. Little short blogs. The Lean Builder has another great blog, and they have a ton of information there, especially around Last Planner System. And then the EBFC Show podcast has a blog with a lot of free content and things to get started and episodes, and just there's the social part. So now you've got a team, a high performing team, or a team that's getting there, and they're just having a conversation about these new things they're learning and learning together. That's going to spark like, let's try something, let's change something. Now they'll start making improvements naturally just with coming together, eating lunch, talking about a new topic. And it doesn't take much preparation, like to prepare a 3-minute thing or just share a link. Here's a show I listened to where Felipe and Jason Schroeder said CPM is killing people. That's an interesting, conversation starter. And that could spark a lot of dialogue on a project. Now, for the individual, I would say one of the first things you have to do is stop doing the things that don't add value. So your first step is to understand what is value. So value it's a subjective term. It can have qualitative and quantitative factors into it. But in the construction and industry, it's typically a beneficial transformation of information materials or a combination of both. So if you think about something, but you don't do anything and you don't change your thinking, you've done nothing. You've spent time. And there's different types of value. There's straight value that people pay you for. That's valuable that transforms. And we almost always get paid for transforming information materials. And then there's things that are not valuable but necessary because of legal reasons, because of policy. Minimize those things. And then those category of the 8 different wastes. Now, the reason I start with understanding value first is because everybody I have met works too hard and too long. And if you look at most of what they do, and researchers have looked at this, they find that somewhere between 60 to 80% of the time we spend every day is non-value added, which means you have an opportunity to work half a day and then get on with your life because the half day that you did work, that you continued to work, didn't change anything and you just wasted your time. And so when you can identify those things that don't add value and stop doing them, you've just increased your bandwidth and your capability to learn more or to go deeper on a topic so that you can start to use and learn some of these tools. Most of the lean construction tools are free. They're in the public domain. You don't have to pay. They're not locked behind a paywall. And that's like the most funniest part. And even with AI, a lot of the AI has a free trial, and most of the AI is trained on all the free stuff because it's in the public domain. So you can talk to artificial intelligence, and you can have it teach you what you don't know about these different topics. I've had some interesting, I've talked to AI about Scrum like for days.
Ways of thinking are usually free.
Yes.
There's a comment in the chat from someone, and it's something we hear over and over, that there's, how do you turn a yeah, but no, I'm the boss, we're doing it this way, sort of those, we just don't have time for this new stuff. Let's get at her. How do you, and have you managed to turn someone like that maybe is comfortable in the way they've been doing things and they've done okay? Um, how do you turn them into something that is possibly better, safer, faster, easier?
Yeah. So yeah, and it's good to see Faraz calling all the way in from the Caribbean. I'm so super jealous that he's in the. I know where Faraz is in the beautiful Caribbean Ocean on an island. Good to see you, my friend. It's a small world. But I would say that when you do that, sometimes we take this approach. We'll go to somebody and we're telling them we want to change something, but what they hear is that we're trying to change them,
Mm,
and that creates resistance. So if you go into that situation, and you can see in the way that the language he's using in his text indicates that he's perceiving it as difficult. And whatever you think, you'll make. So if you think it's hard to make change happen, it'll be hard. If you think it's easy, it'll be easy. You're right either way. And so I often look at what do I have to change in myself so that I can bring this change forward. And that's where I start first. If I want to change a process, the first thing I start with is like, what's my hand in this process? And then how can I make my piece a little better? And then I'm going to ultimately need the people before me and after me to do something as well, because I don't do anything independently. My mom said, "You're very needy. You can't even play alone. You have to always play with someone." I was like, "No, I'm not needy. I'm social." And so I would say, like, when you're talking to a person, it's better to start with, "Hey, this is what I see," and tell them what you see, and then see it with them and say, "What do you see?" And now the two of you are looking at something
mm,
together instead of you saying, "I want to change this thing that you're doing," or "I want to change this thing you're
yeah,
responsible
this
for."
has to be better, or
Yeah.
yeah, that's
So
interesting.
that's a persuasion technique. And if you want to go deeper into persuasion, I highly recommend the work by Robert Cialdini. He wrote a book on persuasion and persuasion, and his book is called Influence. Now he's got it here in the second part. The other reason he believes that not more lean knowledge is out there is because it's expensive to be certified, and that is an assumption that you have to be certified to be proven that you can do this. You can, for us, you can call my boss Nick Lawhorn at the Boldt Company, and Nick will tell you that everything that I do and that I'm for work, I learned on my own for free. I got certifications later. Like I started practicing Scrum for about 8 years before I got Scrum certified as a Scrum Master. And so, like I said, all of the stuff is in the public domain. Sometimes, and there's other cultures where you're not even listened to if you don't have a certification or a certificate. That is true. There are some Eastern cultures where you have to be credentialed in order to have the conversation
Mm,
sometimes, but not at the level that we're talking about. Here we're talking about like what's in your control first. And I know that my friend here is acting as in a project manager role. As a project manager, you have a lot of authority. You have a lot of authority as a PM, and you can just ask for things because you're the boss, and people do it. You don't need a certificate. Like when I started practicing Scrum and Last Planner, and still even today, there's no Last Planner system certification. And yet I've taught courses to other quote unquote expert Last Planners, and not for free. I charge them money because I tried doing it for free, Alan. And when it was free, nobody would come to my course. And then when I charged them $500, suddenly they showed up. Then the experts showed up because they wanted to see like what was different. And every single person that came through my Last Planner training said, "I actually did not know what Last Planner system was until you trained me." And I was like, "Oh, I'm glad. I wish I'd charge you $1,000, not 500." So yeah,
interesting.
that's what I would
So true.
say on those things. Yeah.
So true. So true. I think we're almost at time, Laura. Is that right? I don't know if I don't see any more questions. Some
We,
good
yeah, some of
posts.
the questions have come in on the Q&A, and Teams is a little weird. They got chat and then they got Q&A. So some folks have put in some great questions. There's one from Donna just around kind of how do you combining the last planner system with CPM scheduling. So she's just asking about, we do the like pull planning and the 6 to 8 week part of the last planner system. But we're trying to get that back into the CPM schedule for managing production. And she's kind of wondering, like, is that still considered lean or last planner system, just because we're trying to still tie that back into the CPM schedule? So maybe some insights from you on that, like how do you see the two kind of fitting together, or do they not fit together? And maybe best practices for applying that.
Best practice is always give the customer what they paid for. So if
Yeah.
you have a contract where you owe them a CPM schedule, don't over deliver that. So for most clients, and I've gone through a lot of CPM contract language, you don't need to have a 5,000 activity CPM schedule. And even the project scheduler professional, which is a credential, there you go, Faraz, another credential. Even the people that have that credential will tell you that best practice for even projects that are more than 2 years long, they recommend less than 2,000 activities, which is going to be somewhere short of, in the 20 to 30 page, 8.5 by 11 printed schedule. But best practice, and tying it together with last planner system is a 1 to 5 page schedule. You want a critical path method schedule that shows your big areas, like we typically see in a work breakdown structure. We want to see larger bars for those. And I know some contracts limit how long the activities can be, like 20 days or less. But you want to get a high level schedule that shows you how are you flowing through the building? How are you flowing through the construction site? What's the path? So that people can see in the timeline at any given time, where are we in space and time, and to what level of finish do we have? That's typically a 1 page to 5 page CPM schedule. Now, when you go to last planner system, you get to the 6 to 8 week look ahead. Now we're getting more granular, and I could start to see activities from, 3 days to sometimes 2 weeks is very common for people. 20 work days is almost a month. That's too much. On a 6 to 8 week look ahead, if I had everybody showing me month-long stuff, I'd have like 2 activities every company, and that's not enough detail. So I would say go deeper in your last planner system practice. And the way that the two tie together is that my strategy and high level where I am is in my CPM high level. So like I know it's a 2-year job and I have 18 months left, or to that level. My last planner system gives me my more granular now to what am I doing today? Today by the hour is known very well through the daily planning, weekly work planning, and the look ahead planning. I know for some reliability how I can forecast people and equipment in the future, 2 months into the future. And we see most teams that have a very good last planner system implementation are only looking ahead 4 weeks, but they'll have some other things to use to scan further into the future for long lead items. So that's what I would say to Donna, and then
Yeah.
I think I answered her question.
Yeah, I'd like to add another point to what you're saying, and it's about milestones. Comparing the planned versus actual. The milestones in the what we're going to build in the CPM, if you translate those into the how we're going to build it, and you backfill or pull, as you were talking about, from there with your granular activities, you now have a connection between the two. You can see if you're going to be, before schedule, later schedule, use your different planning, whatever systems you're doing. So for us, we've looked very hard at milestones and talked to customers and sorting out how to make that connection. Actually, it's a good question because it's come up more and more, actually. Do you have any more, Laura? That was a good one.
Yeah, it looks like there's one more question, and it's really just around like how do you convince a public owner to incorporate something like LPS on a project? And they're kind of just wondering, like, has there been a move on kind of the legislative side, like, making LPS mandatory on certain tender documents, kind of maybe weighing some of the pros and cons of that, because of course, like, you may scare off some contractors if you were to do that, but at the same time, it may help for getting projects on schedule or building awareness around the last planner system. So just kind of curious if you have any thoughts around, like, maybe on the public bid side, how to get the ball rolling with LPS.
Yeah. So thank you. Great question. Another Felipe. I would say that you don't have to convince the owner. So remember what I said, same advice I gave to Donna, do what's in the contract first. Now the contract tells you minimum things you have to do to get paid. Minimum. That's what the contract says, minimum. If I want to do a more structured planning and scheduling and I want to do last planner system, I can just do that. I don't have to ask for permission. Every project that I've used last planner system recovering, typically last planner was not in the contract. So many of the teams we work with that are in recovery mode or just trying to get better and become a high performing team, it's not mandated by the contract to do last run, and we still do it. We do it with success and with trade contractor and design team buy-in, and eventually the owner comes around. Just remember, you're on this client, you've got a fiber optic cable development project. That client is trying to connect 2 points. Ultimately, they're trying to connect 2 points because they need to move data through those points for some revenue generating reason or problem solving reason. So the faster you can connect those points for them, the happier they are. They don't care how you got there. They don't care how the sausage is made. They just want to have good sausage, to use a food analogy. So I would say that, and there have been instances, Felipe, where I've seen it made mandatory in the contract, and I see really bad practices as a result of contract incentives and really bad behavior. And a lot of times it comes from the client. The client doesn't understand what does it actually mean to collaborate in the last planner system. And they've focused too much on the incentives like PPC, plan percent complete. And people unfortunately gamify that to the wrong way. And then you don't end up saving any time. So I would just say, like, my public service announcement on last planner system, Takt, and Scrum is that if you're using any three of the methods or all three in conjunction with what your contract says, you should be saving time. And you should be doing it for less cost, so you'd be more profitable. If you're not doing it faster and cheaper, you're doing something wrong. And you might need to phone a friend or do a deeper dive into any of the processes. And my phone number is tied to my social media channel, so people can call me, and people have, like Faraz, so he called me one time. And I've had owners call me too. I've had an owner, I've had this owner, he calls me about every month. We don't work on any of his projects, but he's doing a job in Boston. And he calls me about once a month, every 2 months, and will ask me some question about a challenge he's having on his job. And we'll just have a little chat for half an hour and off he goes. And so I would start with focusing on what problem does the project solve, and then remembering that you don't need permission to do last planner system. Just do it, but do it responsibly. Don't, if you've never done it before, there's ways to step into it.
Absolutely. Well, I think we should wrap up. Felipe, thank you so much for today, and also to your commitment to easier, better, faster, I'll add safer, more enjoyable construction industry. So again, appreciate your insights, and I do encourage people to go to the podcast site, EBFC. It is really interesting. There's topics there about mental health. There's topics about learning Scrum. It's a great spot. I don't know, Laura, if you have any comments to close up.
No, I think that's everything from my end. We'll have the recording link published shortly. And if you have any questions for Felipe, you can find him on his social channels. He's always open to hearing from folks in the industry, and ask him your questions.
Yeah,
Right
thanks
on.
everybody.
All right, Felipe, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Great day, everybody.